You are welcome to OwanaPaedia, the one-stop center for Uganda's history and the history of the rest of the world. My name is Tony Geoffrey Owana, and behind there is the son of the one and only Corporal Matobu Samuel, who exited this earthly life in 2002, but whose memory lives on in his son, Herbert Semiano, who has distinguished himself in our two-man unit. We are a two-man unit, like I always say, but we are not the story. We want to thank you very much for the contributions you've been making to our platform. You've followed the clip of Nakayenze Koni Galiwango in 1986 very, very keenly, and you have also pursued the one of Tito Okello's government in 1985 very, very keenly. The exchange we have had is that some of you made judgments based on the little we had given you, but we promise that we are going to give you more, and like as we said, so that you make informed choices. The story this time is not on those two. Recently, you've seen the funeral of Omukama of Tooro, Patrick Olimi Kaboyo, who is the father of the reigning monarch, Nyimba. And like one or two of you are requesting for the history of Tooro. We have tried to piece it together, and we have today come with the story that brings Omukama Kasagama. Kasagama represents the renaissance of Tooro, and modern Tooro begins with Kasagama up to the present Omukama Oyo. The picture on my screen shows Tooro's most recent kings, beginning in the 1890s with the Kasagama up to the youngest king on earth, who is Oyo. And the story is going to unfold in classic style. We've really labored to piece this item together, and at the end of it all, you will have known that OwanaPaedia is indeed the one-stop center. Herbert insists that I should thank you for subscribing, and to warn those who have not subscribed that you risk having a great future behind you. Now we are taking you back to 1965, the time when Kaboyo succeeded Rukidi, and then also to look at the story of how Rukidi succeeded his father, Kasagama. It's OwanaPaedia. Stay tuned. Grief descended on the kingdom of Tooro when on 21st December 1965, the world learned that Rukirabasaija Sir George David Matthew Kamurasi Rukidi wa Kasatu, 11th Omukama of Tooro, had passed on. But even as they mourned, the Batooro were comforted by the fact that Rukidi's son, Patrick Kaboyo, would carry on the royal line as Olimi III. But the smooth continuity in modern Tooro did not begin here. For the record, Omukama Kyebambe, father of Rukidi III, personifies the rise of modern Tooro. The period between the reign of Kasagama's father, Omukama Nyaika, and Kasagama's own accession in 1891 was extremely turbulent. It saw at least 4 princes occupying the throne until 1880, when Omukama Kabalega of Bunyoro-Kitara finally annexed Tooro. In his The Rise of Our East African Empire, Captain Lugard writes that I now heard that the country of Tooro, which extends from the north of the Albert Edward Lake along the eastern side of Mount Rwenzori to the edge of the Bunyoro Plateau, was not an integral part of Bunyoro, but had been till within a few years a separate kingdom of the Wahuma under a king named Nyimba. The freebooters of Kabalega, armed with guns, had overrun this country and its king had fled to die in exile. The people had been killed, ousted, all enslaved, and the tyranny of Kabalega had repressed the ancient rule. Nyimba had a son named Kasagama, who as a child had escaped with his cousin Yafeti and taken refuge at the court of Mutesa I, where Yafeti obtained some office about the person of the king, who showed him great favor. Lugard goes on to describe Kasagama and Yafeti in very interesting terms. He says, these two youths were closely related to Kabalega, as also was Mutesa, the royal family being largely of Wahuma stock. Both became Protestants, and on the accession of Mwanga and the subsequent persecutions, they retired from the capital to live on an estate given them by Mutesa. Here you can see the hospitality which the king of Uganda, Mutesa I, gave Prince Kasagama, who, by what Lugard writes, could also have been a blood relative of both these and his arch-enemy Kabalega of Bunyoro. Very interesting, but will be probably discussed in another subject. Not forgetting the great legend of Rukidi Mpuga and Katochimera. Let's continue with Lugard. Speaking of the two young Batooro, he says, here they had remained quietly ever since, though Kabalega had made every effort to discover and kill them. Now hearing that I was proceeding towards Tooro, these young fellows came to tell me their story and offered to accompany me, saying that when the news became known that they were with me, the old inhabitants of the country would be reassured and would look on us as their deliverers. Kasagama was an extremely prepossessing youth, both in face and manner. Yafeti was considerably his senior and was lame and had to be carried. It took another 11 years for Tooro to return to the world map of those bygone times. Taking advantage of an invasion of Bunyoro by Captain Lugard and a large Baganda army, young Kasagama attached his tiny but determined force to the invaders, aiming to wrest Tooro away from Kabalega, which they did. The young prince's 14th August 1891 agreement with Lugard's Imperial British East Africa Company saw him installed as Omukama on 16 August 1891. Lugard confirms this in his book. The people of Tooro continued to come in daily to welcome their king Kasagama and to bring us food. It was here, close to our stockade, that I wished him to settle for the present, and as his people joined him, he began to build his village. I made a treaty with him, the stipulations of which were that as he had been restored to his country by the British, he should in all matters obey the orders of the resident at Mengo, Mengo being in Uganda. Elephants were not to be shot without permission and were the monopoly of the Imperial British East Africa Company, with which Kasagama had signed the treaty. Lugard adds that this was an important provision as those animals swarmed in enormous herds throughout this country. Kasagama was also to prevent the import of arms and powder, and all arms in possession of his people were to be registered and held only under the company's license. The company, which is the IBEA, in return pledged its protection to him and his people. Kasagama embraced Christianity with the name Daudi on 15th March 1896 and was baptized by Bishop Alfred Taka. On 16th March 1908, he became the first Omukama of Tooro to be crowned at St. John's Cathedral, Kabarole. Lugard committed Britain to protecting Tooro from any aggression, A little known fact that could be borne in mind as some prepare to delete the names of colonial leaders from our history. The long-awaited return of peace to Tooro gave Kasagama a 37-year reign, also aptly described as the Renaissance of Tooro. Prince George Rukidi ascended the throne on 31st December 1928 when his father Rukirabasajja Daudi Kasagama Kyebambe wa Kasatu joined his ancestors in the hereafter. Thus, even as Batooro mourned Kasagama's passing, they also thanked God that a well-prepared 24-year-old prince was lined up to take charge. Rukidi was crowned on 29th January 1929 at St. John's Kabarole, and in an astonishing coincidence, he also governed Tooro for 37 years, the same period his father Kasagama had governed. Although there are no videos about the public life of Omukama George Rukidi, we have managed to pick out some historic pictures, and the ones we are showing you now suggest that perhaps Omukama George Rukidi was closer to the Buganda monarchy than other kings in Uganda. For instance, this historic picture given to us by the family of the late Captain George Mawanda shows the late Ssekabaka Daudi Chwa standing in a group photograph while his eldest son, George Mawanda, is seated next to Omukama George Rukidi. This was at Chwa's palace in Salama, Munyonyo, in 1939, shortly before Ssekabaka Daudi Chwa died. Sir George Rukidi seems to have been the only king who was invited to Bulange Mengo on the 8th of October 1962 when the Duke of Kent came to pay his respects to Sir Edward Mutesa. We see him in the picture here with Mutesa's brother Omulangira George Mawanda, and behind them is a smiling information minister of the Obote government, Alhaji Akbar Adoko Nikyon. When they entered Bulange, Sir George Rukidi was seated next to the Governor General himself, Sir Walter Coates, and Mutesa was just a few meters away. These pictures are from a Musizi magazine of November 1962. Musizi was a publication of the Roman Catholic Church which ceased to exist about 20 years ago. One might say Sir George Rukidi was spared the agony of seeing his beloved Tooro disappearing again, for he died barely 2 years before the abolition of kings and kingdoms in 1967. His 20-year-old son Patrick Kaboyo succeeded him as Olimi III on 21st December 1965. Rukidi's funeral was the grandest Tooro had ever witnessed and was also attended by, among others, Uganda's Prime Minister, Dr. Milton Obote. What you are about to see was captured by the Uganda Film Unit and only saved from total ruin by OwanaPaedia, which now invites you to Tooro's royal tombs at Karambi. Vehicles ferrying people to the royal funeral included Peugeot 403, Zephyr 6 Mark III, and Mercedes-Benz 190. Led by senior clerics, Omukama Rukidi's body was brought in a Volkswagen Kombi as a ceremonial military guard stood ready. Tooro Kingdom officials were on hand to receive scores of wreaths for the passing king. Prime Minister Milton Obote arrives with his principal private secretary Henry Chamber, and the grand procession to Rukidi's final resting place begins. There is no doubt that the coffin is very heavy indeed. The presence of Europeans and Asian monarchs proves how cosmopolitan Tooro kingdom had become, a far cry from the racial overtones that pass for culture in many kingdoms nowadays. Armed forces saluted Rukidi, who had been a senior police officer and earlier a lieutenant of the King's African Rifles during the Second World War. Now, in death, Rukidi rejoined his father Kasagama with a drum roll as grieving Batooro joyfully prepared to receive their new overlord, Patrick Kaboyo. After Omukama Rukidi's funeral came the traditional ceremonies that would see young Kaboyo graduating from prince to king, beginning with the mock battle for the throne. The Baganda call it Olutalo olw'ebirumbi. According to Ambassador Katenta Apuli, the battle began at the palace of Kaboyo's uncle in Rwengoma at 3 p.m. and that in this ceremony, Katenta's Basonde clan bear the royal shield. The objective is to attack Karuzika Palace and eject the prince who had usurped power there. The impostor is defeated and flees to exile in Mboga, now in Congo, under the ignominious title Muragwangoma. Kaboyo then dons the royal regalia, including the traditional crown known as a kondo, exactly as his father Kasagama did in 1929. Loud ululations from the adoring subjects punctuate the solemn ancient ceremonies. The ancient ceremonies continue with more rituals. Members of the Tooro royal family surround the new king as his subjects do obeisance. See these warriors ferociously manifesting their loyalty to the new king and vowing to die in his defense. forward warning any enemy of what will happen if he or she dares anything here. Always close to the young king is his elder sister Debatebe Elizabeth Bagaya and his elder brother Prince Stephen Karamaji. OwanaPaedia thinks it important to grant you a look at what today's Fort Portal city looked like 50 years ago on the day Patrick Kaboyo became king of Tooro. Uganda film unit cameras zoomed down the valley from the forested hills which envelop it. From above here, one can see the many industrial and commercial establishments as well as the factories that existed then. This ancient plaque announces that our town was named after the first British barracks in Tooro, which was Fort Garry but became Fort Portal in 1900. This change of name was in memory of Sir Gerard Portal, the man who declared Uganda a British protectorate from this very spot in April 1893. At government buildings, flags are still flying at half-mast over the passing of Omukama Rukidi, but those still alive must continue with the battle for life, and we see them trekking to work. Here is the Fort Portal branch of the government's Uganda Commercial Bank, and the Barclays Bank, whose headquarters is in England. Then to the main street with its mainly Indian-owned dukas, already decorated with banana trees for Kaboyo's coronation. Here is a spectacular view of Fort Portal town seen from Karuzika Palace, and a few people are already arriving for the occasion. This is just one of several arches that bedecked the town in preparation for the royal coronation. Behold the coat of arms of Omukama Batooro, signaling all viewers to get ready for Kaboyo. On 29th January 1966, the day Kaboyo took charge, Fort Portal was the center of activity as loyal subjects, Ugandan and foreign dignitaries drove, rode, cycled or walked to St. John's Cathedral to bear witness. VIPs rubbed shoulders with the ordinary folk in a remarkable unity of purpose to be present as an ancient tradition continued its course. arrives in his Cadillac, about which we shall tell you more later. Arriving is Uganda's Nigerian-born Chief Justice Sir Ebert Udoma and his wife, followed by Frank Kalimuzo, head of the public service. The dignitaries arrive in Mercedes-Benz limousines. Moments later, police outriders astride their BSA motorcycles row in ahead of the Omukama's Cadillac the Veil. This vehicle has a 325 horsepower V8 engine, and by the beginning of the 60s, it cost the buyer $4,892. Today, it would fetch $34,100, or about 130 million shillings. Accompanying Kaboyo is his elder brother Prince Stephen Karamaji and his sister Elizabeth Bagay. Archbishop Kasagama of the Church of Uganda leads Kaboyo and the royal family into St. John's Cathedral. Other Tooro VIPs include the late King's elder brother Prince Kesi Kagoro Bahindi and the late King's sister Akiiki, who was Rukidi's Bateve. The day's sermon is delivered by Archbishop Kasagama, Uganda's first native head of the Anglican Church. Also attending is Bishop Abel Balia, the first black African bishop of the Anglican Church south of the Sahara. He is father to Brigadier Ronnie Balia of the UPDF. As he contemplates the weighty responsibilities left him by his late brother the king, Prince Kesi Kagoroba Hindi breaks down and weeps. And here is Lady Kezia Byanjeru, Queen Mother of Tooro, widow of Omukama Rukidi, and mother of the new Omukama, Patrick Olimi. From St. John's Cathedral, the ceremonies moved to Muchwa Chambers, where the Tooro Kingdom Parliament, or Kuratu, conducts business. Leading the way was a police band that provided music for the marching Batooro, who included students from several schools in the kingdom. Muchwa Chambers, the new king inspects a guard of honor mounted by the armed forces. Thereafter, as thousands pay attention, Omukama Kaboyo takes a solemn oath to lead his people without fear or favor. Muchwa chambers, the function shifts to Karuzika Palace, where Omukama Kaboyo stands at attention for the anthems and then acknowledges as jubilant subjects, including students, march past in quick time. Kaboyo responds with a military salute. After changing from the coronation regalia to a more sedate attire, Omukama Kaboyo continues to receive the accolades of his people, expressed in this exclusively Tooro dance. It is of historical significance that the foundation stone of Karuzika Palace was laid by Prime Minister Milton Obote himself on 16th March 1963. Neither Obote nor the pensive new king Kaboyo could foresee that all this would drastically change 4 years later. After the coronation the following day, the people of Tooro welcomed their new king by entertaining him to a football match. It began with a march past, after which Kaboyo blessed the players and started the match by kicking the ball himself. "30 years later, Kaboyo's own son and heir, Oyo, would start such a football match in similar fashion after his own coronation, as the new vision captured it. OwanaPaedia has already shown you the funeral of Omukama Kaboyo on 4th September 1995. It has shown you most recently the ascension to the throne of Kaboyo in 1965. Now, what you will see next is the near miraculous ascension for the second time of Omukama Olimi Kaboyo in 1993, when the National Resistance Movement led by Yoweri Museveni restored monarchies and rule by birth that had been abolished by President Milton Obote in 1967. If you are not with OwanaPaedia, you will have a great future behind you.